Good evening, everybody. Another Sunday evening, the end of the month, and we're back again. It's hard to believe, but welcome everybody. My name is Chris, and my co-host. I almost said co-anchor. I guess you're kind of a co-anchor too. Co-host to my virtual left or right, whichever you are these days, is Rick. Rick, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I'm happy to be anchor, partner, news
Whatever.
person, whatever gets the adventure news out there. We're good, right?
Yes, we are. So, well, welcome to summer all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Yes, high yesterday in the 50s and rainy. And then high today in the 80s. So
Yeah.
that's about par for this time of year. So, but looking forward to the nicer weather and the pages flipping over to May.
hmm
And it is just it's a busy time as always in the Goodman Games front. We are working very hard trying to get a Grimtooth and all the Grimtooth parts
Mm.
off to the printer this week.
Wow.
So another exciting, yep, it's just a couple
Yeah.
weeks after getting Dungeon Denizens completely to the printer.
Wow.
We're knocking this one out too, and then we're right on to the next one after that.
Wow. Just
So yeah,
rolling them out.
we are just churning them out.
Yeah.
We are in the zone, as they say. But doing well. So how are you doing, Rick? What's going on in your world?
I am doing good. So my one group that I'm in as a player, you'll know, I just want you to know
The Lost City?
we finished the Lost City.
Woo! Did
So
you
I
defeat
can speak
Zargon?
about it freely henceforth. It is
Ooh,
it is a done deal. And then in my own campaign, the characters are slogging their way through the Temple of Elemental Evil. They're ready to go to the second level, so they're finally kind of getting to the good stuff.
okay.
They've gone through all the sequential rooms of, hobgoblins and things like
Hobgoblins,
that, and
yep,
bugbears and whatever, and they're kind of chugging down to what I think is the fun stuff. So
cool.
that's all good too. So yeah, a lot of old school action. And my understanding in the game in which I'm a player, now that we finished the Lost City, we are going on to Expedition of the Barrier Peaks, the
Oh,
Goodman Games or version of that. So that will be
sweet.
very interesting.
And you played the Ore version of Lost City, right?
That is correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So
Did
we
you
we
guys get into the catacombs down below and the
we
city and
did.
everything?
We
Okay.
did. We did
Okay,
the
cool.
the challenges and we kind of roamed the city down there and we yeah, I came into the campaign late, but supposedly this campaign started in 2020 and it only wrapped up
Wow.
now. But
Wow.
again, it's a monthly situation,
Yeah,
It's the
yeah.
folks involved are adults with kids and spouses and all that fun adult stuff. It's not like when we were 13 we could play every Saturday or whatever. So
Yeah, hear you,
it's a
hear
little
you.
slower pace, but yeah, it's been a trip. So I don't know how long it's going to take us to get through the spaceship, but we'll see.
Oh, cool. So awesome. Using the same characters, I assume?
So
Probably.
yes, yep.
Yeah,
Uh,
nice.
yeah, I think we're kind of a good level. I think we're all kind of like fifth, sixth level, kind of in that range. So I think we're at a
Cool.
decent place to go into there.
Sweet. That sounds awesome. So,
Yeah. So
well,
lots
folks,
of Gygaxian action coming up.
yes, yes. So definitely. So, well, folks, we have another episode of the top 50 greatest classic adventures of all time, and we will tonight be counting down. We'll be getting into the 30s tonight. We're going to be counting down from 40 to 36. I know we're still kind of, easing our way into this and everything. We appreciate all the comments people are leaving. Tell us what we can do better, different. We've never done a huge countdown like this. I'm sure it's going to start getting exciting once we start getting around the top
Oh
20
yeah.
and cracking the top 20. It's going to start getting to the creme to la creme, as
hmm
they say. So, but we do got to get through these, and there's some really good adventures
hmm
on even back in here, and it's just like really fascinating to see what made the list, where what things edged out
hmm
other things. I definitely want to talk about that tonight.
Yeah.
And then we do have a pretty big surprise kind of right out of the gate tonight. So
hmm
I think we're gonna get to that. And we've got some really good classics to talk about too. So
Yeah.
I guess should we just like kind of get right to it? I don't know if I don't think we need to linger anymore.
No, I think we can creep on in. So let's do it.
All right, so let's do it. So here is number 40.
Number 40.
All right.
All right.
Look at that.
So this is kind of interesting. Our first non Dungeons and Dragons adventure
Yeah.
making the list. The Haunting, Call of Cthulhu. I believe I actually couldn't figure this out because I don't own the early edition of Call of Cthulhu. My version's like 1986, I think, or 87. I forget
Mhm.
what I think. I think I have third edition or something like that. But I think it was 1981. I think this was first published about then when the original Call of Cthulhu came out. It was republished in 2021 as part of their when they redid seventh edition. I guess it was their quick start rules they included in that. So
Mhm.
the Haunting, Call of Cthulhu, our first non D&D or AD&D adventure.
Yeah.
Rick, why don't you give us a little thumbnail about this? I'm not as familiar with this
Sure.
adventure, but I do know some of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely sort of the B2 or the red box adventure. I think for Call of Cthulhu players, I think by virtue of being included with various versions of the rules, I believe it was part of the very first box set of Call of Cthulhu,
Think
first
so, yep.
edition. So, just by default kind of status, I think more people have probably gone through this adventure than any other. It was written by Sandy Peterson, which is never a bad thing. And it's a good intro adventure. My personal take is I think it's definitely one of those adventures. It's a classic. It's got that classic status more by virtue of age.
Hmm.
Now, whether it's held up quite as well, I think we could debate, but I think it's got all the introductory Call of Cthulhu adventure elements there. There's the investigation and the different, veins of investigation that characters can go to, a couple creepy locations, and then of course the final confrontation against the bad guys. So I think all the requisite elements are there.
Yeah, and I think that's a great way to describe it. It's the B2 Keep of the Borderlands of the Call of Cthulhu mythos, basically.
Yeah.
The adventure that, probably more Call of Cthulhu players probably went through than, in the history really of Call of Cthulhu, probably. And for that reason, I think, that you always kind of remember that adventure. I mean, I always remember
Hmm.
my very first, in going through the Keep of the Borderlands. I think that's exactly what this is. Definitely has that strong nostalgia pull,
Hmm.
without a doubt. And I do remember it being. I mean, the first thing that I really liked about it was they did kind of take their time and actually kind of explained some, game design notes on like how to
Hmm.
run it for the game master. And I
Yeah.
thought, and I like that. That's a obviously a great sign of a introductory adventure. Something I do wish like B2 would have had more of.
Hmm.
I mean, I think those elements were there in B2, but they didn't really spoon feed it to you. They're kind of
Hmm.
like figure it out on your own kind of deal. Even to the point of not kind of telling you like this is your base of operations and this is the adventuring site. So I do kind of like that. I like the fact that it was a very straightforward mission with a defined area. It
Hmm.
was good that you had it's called the haunting. There's a haunted house.
Yeah.
But there was an investigation. There was other sites you could go to
Hmm.
actually gather
Yeah.
some intel before you get there. You could go right to the house and get right to the action, which is nice
Yeah.
because I think some players really appreciate that. They want to just get to the action. Of course, in my experience in Call of Cthulhu, which is very limited, you don't necessarily want to get to the action in Call of Cthulhu very quickly
Yeah.
because as soon as guns start going off, people
Yeah.
start dying. And
Yeah.
it's like it's not necessarily a great idea to
Not
get
the
right
same
down
as
to the.
D&D.
Exactly. It's not the same at all. It's not kick the door in and
Yeah.
let's roll for initiative. Not at all. I mean,
Yeah.
you're gonna run into a very short session of Call of Cthulhu if that's
Yeah.
what you think it's all about. So but I like that. I like that
Hmm.
there was enough there the NPCs were kind of fleshed out a little bit. They were kind of interesting.
Hmm.
And then you could certainly get some clues if you go it was the university archives. You can go to the newspaper,
Hmm.
and you can pull old newspaper clippings, and I thought that was really cool. So I liked some of those
Hmm.
elements of it. But
Yeah.
but overall, I mean, the whole adventure, like you said, it was a little on the. I think you phrased it nicely. I think in our show notes, you said it was mundane, or it was a
Hmm.
little, a little. It's more special because so many people remember it.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think even the ultimate haunted house, and I think that the original title of this, I believe, was The Haunted House before it was called The Haunting. So the Corbett Manor is certainly where the action is supposed to be. Um, it's just, I don't know. It's a little dry. It's not. as frightening. To me, there are better examples out there. Now, again, they had the virtue of years of design behind them.
Hmm.
But to me, if people are looking for an interesting, like, Call of Cthulhu haunted house scenario, like uh Detweiler's Music from a Darkened Room, which has a haunted house which is for the Call of Cthulhu Delta Green. That's a great, scary. The house on Spooner Avenue is very frightening, I think. It's really well done. So to me, that's the way to do it. Um, but harkening back to what you said about the other locations, there are a couple creepy locations here that I think a good keeper can take those and run with them a little bit. You have the sanatorium, you have, of course, the Chapel of Contemplation. Both of those locations could really, they don't take up a lot of text in the adventure, but I think a keeper could really breathe some life into both of those locations and make them very spooky or unnerving
Hmm.
before the characters get to the main haunt, no pun intended. So I think, if the keeper's on their toes, even though I know this is kind of an introductory sort of scenario, I think an experienced keeper, I think, could really breathe some life into this and make it better.
Yeah, yeah, I agree 100%, and I think that is actually a good sign of a good introductory adventure,
Hmm.
because you don't want to overwhelm, you don't want to give too
Yeah.
many details. Just like the original, we're going to keep going back to this because
Yeah.
it's a really good reference point. But keep on the Borderlands, there was just enough detail on some of the NPCs in the keep, just enough to give you a
Hmm.
little bit of something to run with, like you said, where once you realize, and a lot of times when we were kids playing back in the 80s, we didn't realize that we could take this little thumbnail sketch and we can make it a full-blown NPC and really, like you said, breathe life into it. We didn't really necessarily think about that. It comes kind of natural to us now.
Hmm.
But that's because we've been playing for 40 years.
Yeah.
And it's like it just takes you to run some games with some young kids like I do at the local 4-H, just to see that they don't know. They think they have to follow the rules. They think they have to follow the script, and they're like they're overly cautious not to go off the script. When so you can go off the script, your players are gonna most of the time take you off the script anyway. So it's like embrace that. So I agree. I think they gave just enough, and again, I love those little tidbits of little things about explaining why this check was done this way,
Hmm.
and maybe that the characters want to push it. And I think that was, I mean, I refreshed on the seventh edition version, which I think has got some differences from back in the day, the first edition version. But still,
Yeah.
I think it made a really good made a solid introductory adventure.
Hmm.
Set in the Northeast, and it's like a contained area. I think it's good, and kind of a compelling final encounter. That boss encounter with the floating knife and everything is
Hmm.
actually kind of cool, and
Yeah.
there was quite a bit of details put in that on the tactics and everything,
Hmm.
and what you do is I love the fact that there was the rules about trying to grab the knife. I
Hmm.
love that because if you have a floating knife attacking the party, somebody's gonna try and grab it. I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, come on. I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, do you know that's gonna happen? So it's like, yeah, you might as well address that in the text.
Yeah.
So I think a lot can be learned by the beginning keeper checking this adventure. And like I said, actually, you can get this adventure. It's a free download. It was part of I think it was 2021 free RPG day. I think is what it was, if I think I got it right.
Yeah.
So
In the
it's
quick
on their
start,
website
right?
as a free download.
Yeah, I think, what is it, the seventh edition
Yep.
quick start rules.
Yep. So this is a great one if you wanted to check out, if
Yeah.
you've never played Call of Cthulhu before and you kind of want to know what it's all about and everything. I think this gives a really good feel for it. So, but, back in the day, back in the 80s, late 80s, and even the early 90s, when I was pretty heavy in the RPGA days, it was really D&D and Call of Cthulhu. I mean, there were
Hmm.
other games out there, but
Yeah.
that was the 1A and 1B. and
Yep.
and it was like, especially if you went to a lot of conventions, and we're a little biased because we're in the Northeast, so it's like
Hmm.
all the Northeast conventions I used to go to, and there used to be one like every weekend for like a 7-week period, starting in like February. In the Northeast, Call of Cthulhu were very popular. The
Hmm.
midnight Call of Cthulhu games. It's like the convention would shut down, but there would be a midnight slot, and you'd
Yeah.
play Call of Cthulhu basically from midnight until dawn. And it's just one of those things you have to do. You have to do,
Yeah.
like, once
Oh,
if
yeah.
you're a gamer, you got to do
Yeah.
it.
It's just even for me as a D&D main, so to speak, I love Call of Cthulhu just as something fresh and different. You're playing in a different way, you're GMing in a
Yeah,
different way, and it's a fresh experience. And Call of Cthulhu, it's a survivor. It's
yeah,
like you said, it's kind of one of the big two that's been around, since the time of early D&D, and it's still going strong. And
yeah.
and a lot of other games, especially horror games, let's be honest, have come and gone. So
Come and gone, come and
I mean,
gone.
I always look with interest when I see new sort of takes on the horror genre and things that come along, like I don't know, like Mothership or things that are kind of contemporary. But yeah, Call of Cthulhu has stood this, the test of time. So,
Yeah.
it's a survivor.
Yeah, well, no, without a doubt. So, and it's great seeing a non D&D
Oh
entry
yeah,
on our list. Finally, we made
yeah,
sure that people understood that we were not limiting
yeah.
ourselves to D&D and AD&D. So, as I say, it's definitely not the first one showing up on the list, folks. So, there's other ones coming. So, we're really excited about
Mhm.
that. So, cool. Any final words on the haunting
No, I
or?
think we're ready to roll on to
All
our
right, we
next
are ready
entry.
to roll. We are officially in the 30s now, number 39. Take it away, Elena.
Number 39.
All right.
There we have it. A little bit
Yeah,
of a surprise here.
this one surprised me.
Yeah,
This one
me too.
surprised me.
Me
That it
too.
made the list and made
Hmm.
this high in the 30s. EX1
Yeah,
Dungeonland, 1983.
yeah.
AD&D written by Master Gygax. So this is interesting, but you know what? And I had a fun time reviewing this one. This is not an adventure I would normally pull off my shelf and flip through and look again. But I have to admit, um, I think Gygax did a phenomenal job with this.
Hmm.
For those of you who don't know, this is a tongue-in-cheek kind of don't take yourself completely seriously. This is AD&D meets Alice in Wonderland taken to 11,
Yeah.
basically. And I actually did you ever run this adventure?
I did not.
I did. I did.
Oh,
Yeah. And it's like,
surprise. I'm
yeah,
surprised.
you know what? And it's because I remember buying, because back in the day, I bought every module that TSR did.
Sure.
Didn't matter. I bought the ones with the,
Yeah.
the invisible ink markers and everything. Didn't matter what the gimmick was. Didn't matter what levels it was or what the picture was. I just would buy them all.
Hmm.
So I bought this one, not really expecting much and everything. Yeah, it did have Gygax's name on the front. Did have the newer treatment since it was in the later part of the early 80s. Is that such a thing? The later part of the earlier 80s. Um, but so it had that that more modern approach and some of that better artwork and everything. Um, but this is a really solid take on Alice in Wonderland meets D&D. And
Yeah,
I think the implementation is quite good. I honestly think
it is.
it's probably one of Gygax's best, adventures, in my opinion. In my
Hmm.
opinion, this is not just 8 pages of a giant's lair. This
Yeah.
is a pretty fascinating location.
Yeah.
A lot of weird stuff going on, but I also think the way he blended the rules
Oh
and the
yeah.
monsters and made them fit works. So
Yeah.
so take it away.
I
What do
I
you
totally agree. I think the way certain characters were given classes, like I think the Mad
Yeah.
Hatter is a monk, and
Yes. Yeah.
the caterpillar, granted it's polymorphed, but it's a Behir, and but it's
Yes.
still got the smoke kind of,
Yep.
abilities. He really tried to use the D&D rules to translate all
Yes.
these kind of characters, not just the biggies like the Cheshire Cat and the Duchess, but some of these other kind of even more minor characters were translated over, and just the effects and stuff. I mean, you can tell it's kind of a high level Gygax module in that there's a lot of the players cannot use this spell, and this spell will not work here, and no matter what the characters do,
Yeah.
they can't get through this wall or this door or this hedge. You get a lot of that, which maybe would turn off some people, but I think given the whole kind of nature of this place, it's sort of, I guess, a demi-plane, for lack of a better term. It totally works. I have no
Yeah.
issues with it myself. I think taking some characters that are really jaded and getting to a higher level and really need something different, This was part of the original Castle Greyhawk, and
Hmm.
as Gygax writes in his introduction to the module, the players were ready for something different, and
Yeah,
they got kind of dumped into this demi-plane for, like a few sessions of play, and it was something really fresh for them, and they had fun with it.
yeah.
And
I
it,
yeah, I really liked that there was really no intro and setup.
yeah,
It is literally
yeah,
drop them
yeah,
in when you want to. And it was like there wasn't this big long-winded, here's the backstory, here's
yeah,
this. There's no mission of why you're going to Dungeonland and why you're
yeah,
exploring here. It was literally a when you need to
yeah.
drop your characters in and put them in that endless shaft when they're
Yeah, drop
falling and
them in the
everything.
shaft.
And you know what? It worked.
It
It
does.
absolutely worked. It was not a cop out. It was not a cop
Yeah.
out. It
No.
absolutely worked. And I remember doing that and again having a couple of sessions. We might have only even had one session. Back then we
Hmm.
used to play for like 6 or 8 hours. So and in first edition you could get pretty far. The combats are pretty quick and everything. It was at least one session we did. But I,
Hmm.
I remember just doing that, just
Yeah.
basically saying we're just gonna have fun, basically, and we're gonna turn everything on its ear,
Hmm.
and there's gonna be wacky, crazy stuff going on. And as soon as you get the buy-in from the players, and it's not the cup of tea for all the players out there,
Yeah. Yeah.
probably, but if you get the right group of players and you get that buy-in, I think it's a really fun
Hmm.
time, and I
Yeah.
think you could definitely make some good memories, and you could really have a blast, kind of, and really
Yeah.
kind of
No,
play
I
around with some things
agree.
can't normally.
And that's the way to do it, rather than sort of have the characters initially aware of what the deal is,
Yeah.
to just throw that shaft at them. Because, in my own campaign, there was a point years ago where I was a big Land of the Lost fan as a kid,
Oh, yes.
loved like every boy, I loved dinosaurs, and, the Land of the Lost was my thing. So at one point for my own campaign, sort of to do something a little different and whimsical, I took the Land of Lost, sleeve stack everything, and I statted it up for, you know, D&D. And I basically just had my characters at one point go over a great big waterfall. I did not give them any preamble. I didn't tell them what was
Hmm.
happening. They just got kind of teleported onto a waterfall, dumped over a waterfall, and then all of a sudden they were in this prehistoric land and they had to figure out what was going on. And it was probably a session or two before they even made the connection that it was Land of the Lost, because some of my players had watched the show as kids, but it took them a while to kind of catch up. And it was a lot of fun doing that. I think letting that play out and letting them
Hmm.
put the pieces together and then realizing it was something different. And like you said, when there's some like buy-in there, so to speak, which I think is necessary for these different modules. When you have modules that are weird in some way, that are a little humorous or a little, add sci-fi elements, or, bend the constraints in some way, it is good to have that buy-in from your players. But if you have that and you have the right group, things like this can be so much fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. So real quick, we are 20 minutes into this show, over 20 minutes. We don't have a single comment yet in the chat, so we got to change that. Can somebody please comment and let us know
Oh
that
yeah,
we're on the air
give us
here?
something to work
And
with.
yeah, let us know that you're listening and you're like, wow, even though you might not be a Call of Cthulhu fan, or an Alice in Wonderland fan. There we go. Oh, that doesn't count.
I think we
So
scared
when
them off
Lena
of
makes
Call
a
of
comment,
Cthulhu.
that totally doesn't count. So oh, she's doing it even more. So okay. Anyway, so just throwing it out there. So what back in our old show, we would always talk about when we present you with a title of an adventure. What's that first thing that jumps out to you? What do you remember most from it? There's a lot of things from this
Oh,
adventure, but what's one of the things that jumps out
ah.
to you that you remember about Dungeonland? And
Honestly, the two things, and the one sounds like a no-brainer, but the two things I think of is the whole shaft with the shrinking, like potion of shrinking, and the little
hmm.
items that they can kind of grab as they go down. And then that sort of grand melee at the end where it's just a whole hodgepodge of characters thrown into this room. And it can go a lot of different ways, but it could turn into this complete insane melee if the
Yes.
characters, depending on what kind of players you have. So that's kind of what comes to mind for me.
Okay. For me, it's the croquet game. I mean,
Okay.
that is like an encounter I would so design. I mean,
Hmm.
having flamingos as the mallets and hedgehogs as the ball. And if you miss the ball, the flamingo actually attacks you. Oh, I
Mhm.
mean, that is gold. Now, it really reminds me of back in the heyday of the RPGA. There were a lot of weird events, and this felt like this could have easily been an RPGA event. Like you would show up and you wouldn't know that you're going to be playing Alice in Wonderland for the next 4 hours, but here you go, you're like into it. So it definitely gave me that kind of feel, and I think back in those days, my whole group was very much in the RPGA, so I think it fit that we kind of liked it and we kind of had the right group for it. But that's definitely, but there was a lot of really cool artwork. There was the
Oh yeah.
Executioner's hood, which was a
Yeah.
really cool adventure, new monster design,
Yep.
which went on to kind of be a classic. There's a lot. They did so many cool things with carnivorous plants
Oh yeah.
and like you said, the behir being the caterpillar with
Mhm.
the smoke rings had all these different magical effects. Oh, it was amazing. Clay, thank you for chiming in. Scott, hey guys, good to see you. So we have a couple. We have at least two people out
There
there
we go.
listening. So to us on this fine evening. So yeah. So any other final comments on EX1 Dungeonland?
No, just like I said, I'm surprised it hit the list,
Yeah.
but just by virtue of its audacity,
Me
and
too.
it's the first part of a two-parter, which
Yeah.
really was some bravery on the part of TSR. So to kind of
Well, when it's Gygax and he owns the company or the
yeah,
founder
who's
of the
gonna
company or
say,
whatever,
right?
I mean, is it really bravery? I mean, he can do whatever
This
the hell
is
he wants
true.
to do. I'm not sure anybody else is going to get an Alice the Wonderland D&D adventure published, but when you kind of,
Yeah, that
when you
does
own
give
the
you carte
company,
blanche, right? To do what you
exactly,
like.
you get to do a
So
little bit of whatever you want to do. So you just like you get to call the drow or the dro or the whatever because we know that you
yes.
mispronounced it and
And I'm
everything.
going to do that before the show's over too,
I'm sure you
because
are.
there's a golden opportunity coming up later in
Yes.
the show.
I'm sure you are. So, all right. So that wraps us up with
All right.
EX1 Dungeonland. So that was a fun little romp. So now we're gonna get back to a little bit more on the serious side here.
Mhm.
And we've got our number 38 coming up. So take it away.
Number 38.
All right. Okay. B10 Knights Dark Terror. Haha, terror. I almost said tower. So I think folks who have followed our previous show know this is one of my favorite adventures of all time. I believe it's in my top five. Um, excited it made the list, disappointed
Mhm.
it made this low. I think it needs more pub. But I think it flies under the radar a lot.
Yeah,
I
it
think
does.
not too many folks know about it. It was released at the very end. It was 1986. It was released, so TSR was a little bit on a downswing at that point. The heyday was really probably 82 to 84 was when you had a lot of really solid adventures coming out, maybe 81 to 84. So I think a lot of folks missed this one. This was a double length one. It was really thick. It was made from the
Mhm.
awesome design team across the pond. I think a lot of people are not familiar with this adventure for a lot of those reasons. And I am telling
Yeah.
you, this is
Yeah.
a diamond in the rough, whatever you want to
Yeah.
call it. Scott says, "Yay, basic set." If you recall, this was a special basic slash expert
Right.
crossover adventure.
Transitional,
Yeah, it was really
right?
a here's how you do wilderness, but when you put dungeons all scattered about and everything, which is
Mhm.
exactly the best way to describe it. So,
Yeah.
so this is just I have this is just an amazing adventure. I could talk about this adventure for an hour. I really could. But anyway, Rick, take it away. What are your thoughts about this adventure?
Sure. Well, I agree wholeheartedly as far as the diamond in the rough classification. I think this one totally flies under the radar. This is, if you say, the Frost Giant Jarl, the folks at a convention, they know exactly what adventure you're talking about. But if you say Night Star Terror, a lot of people just kind of give you that look. They don't
Yeah. If you say
know. And
Suzukan, they don't know what you're talking
yeah,
about.
and that is a shame because there's so much good stuff in here. I mean, the one thing I've always kind of said about this particular adventure is, to me, it's a campaign. It's not,
Yes.
an adventure. You have all these chapters with these different locations and different dungeons and so many. The maps, the whole map spread thing is wonderful without even going into the battle map. Talk about a nice early sort of battle map treatment. So much bang for the buck here. Just hours and hours of play if you wanted to bring your characters to all these different locations. There's just so much packed into this book. You have some great authors, like you said, a UK team on this. A good number. I mean, the three people who were responsible for this were among some of the key people who wrote Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay First Edition, I believe the same year this came out. So, you have your writing talent there. So there's just so much good here. There's so much good stuff. I think I want to say this made my top 10 adventure list. It
I
wasn't as
think it
high up
did.
as you had it, but I
Yeah.
think I had it on my top 10 too. I honestly don't remember, but I think very highly of this. And this is one, now that I go back on hindsight and kind of reread it in the modern day, my respect for it only grows. I think
Agreed.
everybody should check. If you don't have a copy of this, just go on, eBay or wherever and find the
Or
copy of this
drive
thing. Or
through.
just,
Yeah.
just get a
Actually,
PDF of it.
this is one of the few where I think you actually want to have the hard copy though, because of those
Yeah.
maps, especially the
Yeah.
fold up map. Especially you can find one with the cardboard counters.
Oh yeah.
So this adventure had so Rick alluded to it in the very beginning. There was a siege of a wilderness. It was a homestead or a fort or whatever. It was like a fortified house or a compound or whatever you want to call it. But they gave you a full fold out. It was like a 6-panel map, I think, or
Yeah.
a 4-panel map or something. Of the actual where you can where it was basically 1-inch squares kind of thing before 1-inch squares became a thing in third edition. And then they gave you battle system like cardboard shits, but they were not like, it wasn't that one goblin was 10 goblins. It was like one for one, basically. And it was great. I mean, it was phenomenal to use that at the game table. That was like the beginning of the adventure. That was like just one chapter of it. You just use that, and then you go off to all of these different locations. You tramps around the wilderness, and each dungeon has its own feel to it and its own personality. And we talk about that on how when you're designing something big like a mega dungeon, how important it is to not fall into that samey character where this level is like this level, and this level is another level of orcs and another level of orcs and another level of orcs. And it's very, very, we were so cognizant of that when we were designing Castle White Rock that we still fell into it at times because we just got carried away at times with some of the levels, but still, like, the challenge of just trying to make it feel different, all these different, and they pulled that off to, like you said, a bunch of mini dungeons in the wilderness. But they all were tied in. There was a central plot and everything, and it just oozed personality and theme and everything, and it was great. And to this day, I would love it. It was on my short list of getting the ore treatment. I would have loved to get in there and give that the official ore treatment, but I don't know if people would have loved it and embraced it because again, it flies under that radar. But it's one of those ones where you really got to check it out. If you're a fan of these old classic adventures, you gotta check this adventure out.
And
So,
even if it's not used for the whole, and frankly, I think it should be. An able TM could go in there and steal a section, steal a map. There's a very modular feel to it where, a DM could just steal so much from this, frankly. I used to I remember owning this, and for whatever reason, I never got around to running it. But later on, I just remember kind of pilfering the maps and just, because I loved all those little kind of maps that you had. And like you said, there was such a variety of stuff that it was like a DM's playground. You could just go in there and pick and choose, little things and use later in your campaign if you wanted, if you never ran the whole thing. So
yes, but we've done good work here tonight, Rick, because Spooky Dead Man says I'm sold. So I feel like we've reached somebody.
There
if we
we
just
go.
reach one at a time, we get
we don't get
convinced.
a kickback, but it might seem
come
like
over,
that.
come over to the dark side. We've got cookies.
Yes.
So, but yeah, so again, this is just it's a phenomenal one. There's just so much good about it. Like you said, pulling those little bits and pieces of it. definitely it's worthy of running the entire mini campaign, start to finish, because there's just so much good. Your players will not get bored. And
Yeah.
it was the simple little touches. The fact that there's a bunch of humanoids in this. There's like there's goblins attacking the fort, but there's two tribes of goblins, and they don't give a lot of detail, but they give just enough detail. They give the tribes different names and
Mhm.
different themes, if you will. They dress differently, they use different weapons, their leaders are different, they have like different pets. And they kind of do that throughout the adventure. So it's kind of cool. So it's like, even though you're still running into goblins, these are the goblins that were allied with vampire bats, and then these are the goblins that are allied with the wolves. And they're,
Mhm.
so it gave you a little, and it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't a ton, but it just gave you enough to make it feel fresh and exciting,
Yeah.
and a little bit different, and I love that. I mean, I just love that feel. Yeah, and Clay says would appeal to the Red Hand of Doom. I think it was Red Hand of Doom fans. Yes, I
Yeah.
think Red Hand of Doom, I think, really took a lot of the inspirations from this
Yeah.
adventure. I don't
Yeah.
know if they specified that in those design notes, but it does definitely harken to
Mhm.
a similar cut from a very similar cloth. And if you
Yeah.
know the adventure, cut from a similar cloth, that's
Mhm.
a deep cut. That's a deep cut that goes right to the plot of the adventure. So I'll let you guys figure that one out on your own. So again, I could talk about this one. I could have,
Yeah.
I had to not pull this one out and start looking at it, because I would have done
Mhm.
a reread from the beginning to the end, and then I would have ignored rereading
That's how you
Dungeonland and
know a
so
good
on.
adventure, that it sucks. It's like a good movie, good.
Yeah.
Those movies you watch again and again,
Oh yeah.
you turn on cable television and they're on and you just helplessly
Yes.
get sucked in them, even if it's the
Oh
movie's already started. Uh,
yeah.
it's definitely one of those. I think in general, the UK products really didn't get the recognition across
Yeah.
the board that they deserved. But this is a great example. If somebody wants to, jump across the pond and look at some of the work that was being done at that time from that group, couldn't get a better example than this.
Agreed, totally. Yes, and I totally concur with you on that. I was actually traveling this weekend and actually had cable TV for a change, and in a hotel room, and sure enough, TNT was doing Star Wars all weekend or whatever, which is weird that they were doing it this past weekend and not this weekend coming up, because that's May the 4th. But
Right,
anyway,
right.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe it was a I don't know, whatever. But I did watch the last half hour of Empire Strikes Back, and like bits and pieces, choice bits and pieces of Return of the Jedi. So yes, I agree with you. It's like that awesome movie on cable that whenever it's on,
Yeah.
even though you know the lines by heart,
Hmm.
Princess Bride, Spaceballs,
Oh yeah.
all the good
Yeah.
classic ones,
Yeah.
Caddyshack, you get sucked in, and you just end up watching it anyway. So yeah, so I think that's all. I think I'm gonna stop blabbing about one of my favorite adventures of all time, so we can get through the rest of our list here in a reasonable kind of time. So, any final comments on B10 Night's Dark Terror?
No, I think we've sold it. So let's roll on to our next one.
All right, let's roll on to number 37.
Number 37.
Okay. All right. So, not surprised at all to see
No.
G3 Halls of the Fire Giant King finding its way onto this list. AD&D, obviously, 1978, one of the very first early adventures.
Mhm.
I know this is a very special adventure in your heart. And
Mhm.
you like this one much better than I like it.
Yeah.
I like it. I like it. Don't get me wrong, but I know
Hmm.
this is a favorite of yours, Rick. So why don't you get us kicked off on the Halls of the Fire Giant King?
Sure. Yeah. I always loved this one. I always thought it was a good capstone to the three giant adventures. Like I've discussed, some of the other giant books like G2 have sort of raised their stock a little bit in my rereading. But I always liked this one because I felt like it had a good mix of encounter areas and rooms. You had the tomb with the twisty kind of passage where the characters would lose all direction, and you had that kind of exploratory stuff. You had some great set pieces. You have that wonderful encounter in the torture room where people are getting thrown into a pit and tossed into Iron Maidens, and who knows what
Yes.
else when they're fighting this torturer and this other person. So there's a lot of good moments in here that I think a DM could have fun with. Honestly, I think the only criticism I've ever had with this, which, I think you share, is I think the environment, there could have been more done with the environment. I mean,
Yeah.
the one thing I loved about G2, the Frost Giant Jarl, was that whole glacial environment was really used, I think, in a wonderful way. And this just does feel like a dungeon. It feels like a dungeon that could have been sitting anywhere as opposed to in the middle of the hell furnaces. Now,
Mhm.
yes, I know there's lava on the bottom layer, etc., but I just don't feel like that hell furnaces location, and even kind of the fire giant aspect maybe could have been leaned into a little harder here. And I think that would have got it a little more away from that generic dungeon kind of feel that this one had. That's my one big criticism with this. But aside from that, yeah, no, I love, like I said, there's many. If you dig down into this and you read it, the maps are beautiful. There's some wonderful encounters. You have some great villains.
Mhm.
I mean, King Snurry's wife is a wonderful villain. You have the evil mountain dwarf Obmi in this, who, if
Mhm.
you've read the Gygax's Gourd the Rogue books, he figured in those prominently later on. So, you have some very like good villains, even potentially recurring villains, like in the case of Obmi, that you could really haunt your players with, and I think it has some fun there. So, some good aspects. They really gave the bad guys some personality in this one, which I like.
Yeah, yeah, and some great NPCs that were captured,
Hmm.
and that you could free and they could help or hinder you. I always
Hmm.
loved that, where they gave you like a selection of them and you're always like, oh, we don't know who we can trust, who we can't trust.
Hmm.
Do like I agree with you that I don't even remember if like when you got to the third level, I don't remember if there was like any effects of being close to the lava. Obviously you fell in the lava, it was a problem,
Yeah.
but like I would think that level would have been really hot and you should have taken damage over time or something. I don't think there was anything environmentally compelling like the wind and like you said in
Yeah.
the Jarl the Frost Giant. But again, this adventure had it all, some great tactics. I believe there was a whole section on the if the characters attack and pull back,
Yeah.
here's what they do and here's what they hold up. I remember doing just that when I was
Hmm.
playing this through, and then my buddy pulled all the giants, almost all of them, they defended level 2 and we went down to level 2 and we had one heck of a fight. I remember that fight literally lasting hours and literally it coming down to almost all the PCs on the floor dead, or dying, they dead, but it was a knock 'em out drag 'em out fight and it was
Hmm.
amazing. So I think that was pretty fascinating, that part of it. And then you had the introduction of and we're going to get into the discussion now, and we're going to hear Rick's story on how to pronounce it, the Drow. So that I don't think that can be understatement. It's like even though you had Vault of the Drow later on, and the Drow figured prominently in the third adventures, the second trio of adventures, I think it was this was the one where they were first introduced, and I think
Hmm.
that's what kind of I think cuts makes this one lets this one stand apart
Hmm.
from the others. The fact that you're like, whoa, what is going on here? Dark elves, and there was a lot of them.
Yeah.
It was there was quite a bit of them, and the Clavdra was there.
Yep.
And so it was really that was the watershed moment of the
Hmm.
the whatever. It's not a trilogy of adventures. There's 7 of them, but it was that
Yeah.
pivotal moment of whoa, more than just giants are going on here.
Yeah.
And this was again, we take it for granted now, but
Hmm.
this was the first time anybody ever saw the Drow,
Yeah.
and there's something about that. I
Yeah.
mean, so
No, it was sort of like, because really the whole point of the characters going through all these giant modules was really trying to get behind what was going on with this
yep.
uprising of giants. And then to find out, that the Dark Elves are playing a role. And yeah, the first introduction of, and I'm going to say Drow, the first introduction of the character Eclavdra, which really took on a life of her own and appeared in many products going forward, and really kind of became a main
And
dark elf kind of character, recurring
yep.
character, I guess, or villain.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, to me, even when you got through the Descent series, there wasn't a lot of characterization given to some of the villains and things when you went all the way to D3, but a Clavdor was sort of a connecting tissue that you technically could pull. If somebody
Definitely.
did murder her before then, you could kind of have her as a sort of recurring villain with some personality throughout the whole thing. So yeah, there was a lot of interesting firsts here. It was that's why I feel like it was a good capstone for the three giant modules,
Totally. Yeah.
because it raised the stakes and it provided a nice bridge to the Underdark that totally makes sense. That I have played through this a couple of times, and I had situations where the characters kind of stopped at the giants, and then ended there and didn't pursue, and then there were situations where the characters went running headlong into the Underdark, and just kept on going. So lots of fun in actual play for me. Like you said, the tactics part, I had a party that kind of did what Gygax, I think, had mentioned, where they did a kind of initial foray and then pulled back. And then when they came back into the giant halls, I had the
Oh,
giants waiting there with a great big,
yes.
scorpion or whatever, ready to, shoot down the hallway,
Yep. Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Scott in the chat says his party spent 2 gaming sessions holed up in the starting hallway in alcove because we ended up getting trapped between giants. Yeah. No, I
Yikes.
remember that. I mean, I remember I'm to this day was probably my buddy's finest moment as a game master, pulling off the tactics that he pulled off and managing this huge fight and everything. Because he was not their typical game master, and it was like it was great. He took those couple of bullet points that Gygax put down on what they would do and ran with it, and made for one heck of a set piece. Once we got past that, that battle, the
Mhm.
other levels until we got to the drow was pretty easy because we defeated almost all the giants on levels 1 and 2, and some of their allies. But yeah, that was crazy. I'm going to pause for a second here. Spooky Deadman has a question for us. We love it, folks. We
Mm.
love when you guys have questions. It tells us that we're not just talking to dead air. So do you guys have a favorite giant type? So
Ooh,
Rick, why don't you go first? What's your favorite giant type?
that's a good question. I would probably say frost giant.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
It would be between Frost Giant and Fire Giant, I think.
Frost
I think
Giant and
there's
Fire.
possibilities with both that you could really have some fun with.
Yeah. I think my favorite is the Stone Giant. Because
Mhm.
they haven't been really used that much.
Right.
Obviously they didn't get their whole adventure to shine and everything. But I like them because they're not necessarily always evil, and
Hmm.
they had some priests in there and everything, and I was just always fascinated by them. They just seem to be a little bit different. So those are my favorite. And grape ape. Oh, that's a rough one to say. Texas evening, gents. Yes, we are going. Glad that you could join us at the tail end. Of course, as always, folks, you can check us out on YouTube afterwards. We'll post
Yeah.
this video on YouTube, so you guys can take a look see on that. Yeah. So one of the things that I remember about this adventure that I love is there was the classic red dragon encounter
Hmm.
down in the, I think was it the second or the third? I think it was the
Third
third
level.
level.
Third
Third
level.
level, yeah.
Yeah.
And a classic dragon horde too, which was
Hmm.
amazing as well. So I remember that encounter fondly. That you just basically have an ancient red dragon just kind of hanging out. Makes sense, hanging out with the fire giants and
Yeah.
everything. Um, but yeah, so this adventure was like you said, a great capstone to the three. I was always kind of disappointed with how this adventure started. This
Hmm.
was the one with the infamous link chain one,
Yeah.
right? Where you basically find a chain in the
Yeah.
frost giant lair, and you basically link it together or whatever, and like everybody gets teleported to it. Yeah, I understand this was a tournament adventure, and that was a great way to start adventures for a tournament. But
Yeah.
it would have been nice if there was, a page or two. And get these adventures, folks, by the way, were 8 to 12 pages long. I believe all 3 levels of the Fire Giant Lair were 12 pages, maybe 16.
Yeah. This one might have been slightly longer, but
Yeah, it might have been 15 pages or something like that, or 16 pages. But it would have been nice if there was a little bit of like wilderness section
oh
in between,
yeah.
kind of linking them in, and a
Totally.
little bit of
Totally
a
agree.
this is the route they take to
Hmm.
communicate with each other. But you were talking
Yeah.
about, I think, hundreds of miles, I believe, in between the layers, if I'm not mistaken. It was
Yeah. I
definitely
mean,
it was definitely
I
scores of miles.
if you were, yeah, I mean, if you were playing this in Western Greyhawk, the hell, I mean, this one was located in the hell furnaces,
Yep.
you know,
You have the
the
Crystal Mist
the
Mountains
crystal
and
mist, yeah, completely different range. So
yep.
you're really kind of jumping from like Geoff or
Yes.
someplace all the way
And
over here. So yeah, you are talking a very big distance. But like you said, how I wish, there was some environmental stuff or outdoors, anything, just the characters instead of getting teleported right at the
yeah,
door. Maybe
basically, yes.
maybe they had to climb up just a mountain a little bit or something
Yeah.
to get to the doorway where they're seeing, this ashen kind of this Mordor like environment, and they had
Yeah.
to get there. I think, and just do a little bit of travel would have been so much fun because you could have put some local creatures in and really kind
Yeah.
of played up that hell furnaces environment. I think that would have set the stage, for what was to come.
Agreed. Totally agreed. Spooky Deadman says Frost Giants here, so there's another vote for Frost Giants, Team Frost Giant.
Yay!
And Scott chimes in 16 pages, not counting the 3 maps. That's right.
There
There
we
was the
go.
3 maps. I do remember it was the 3 maps, the
Yeah.
3 levels. The other 2 adventures were 2 levels. So yeah, this was a great one. Again, not surprised this is on the list. Probably a little surprised it's as low as it is, but again,
Yeah.
I think you run into that. You've got G1 through 3, you've got the GDQ series. This is gonna
True.
this
True.
theoretically this might show up on the list 3 times
Yeah, that's a
theoretically
good
for this
point. There's a
plot.
lot of
So
permutations of the G
yeah,
and D series that could raise
totally.
their heads.
Exactly.
Um,
So I think that is part of it. So
yeah.
any last comments on health the oh my god, I'm blanking on the name of it. The Halls of the Fire Giant
Halls
King.
of the Fire Giant. No, I like it. I think it's worth running, and it's surprisingly challenging too.
Yeah.
That's worth mentioning is that lower level can be pretty dangerous. Even
Oh yeah.
dragon aside, there's a ton of trolls and other things running around, and the aforementioned dark elves. So just, you got to have the players better be ready when they go into this one.
Completely. So we have one more to count down for the night,
All
and
right.
then we will put a bow on this next episode. So we are going to be revealing number 36 next.
Number 36.
Another surprising entry on this, so we're just going to keep on going. This is a continuation. First time in the list where we've had 2 modules where they sequentially followed each
Yeah,
other.
they
This is a
connect.
D1 and 2 Descent into the Depths of the Earth. Now, this is the 2 adventure compilation
Mhm.
of D1, which was Descent into the Depths of the Earth, and then D2, The Shrine of the Koatoa. Now, I will admit, there could have been some confusion with the voting with people. A lot of people put down D1, Descent into the Depths of the Earth, or they put D1, D2. It
Mhm.
was a little bit confusing. So, because people wrote in things differently. So, this was
Mm.
one of those things where I had to make a judgment call. And I'm like, I think they're talking about both, or they would put D1 down, but they clearly made comments about the Shrine of the Koatoa.
Okay.
So, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
so but anyway, again, a little bit of confusion there, but I went with D1, D2. Again, not surprised that this one's on here. Again, we're going to talk about this a little bit because this is, like I said, 2 adventures. Yeah, a
Hmm.
lot of Gygax tonight, as it should be. I
Oh
think you're
yeah,
going to
as it
see,
should be.
yes, I think you're going to see at the end of the list, so, when we do our stats show and our breakdown, I think you're going to see quite a few Gygax entries on this list, obviously.
Yeah.
But this is interesting because, I think both of us agree that D1 is definitely a weak link
Hmm.
in all 7 of the adventures, possibly, but D2 really shines.
Hmm.
So it's really kind of interesting that D2 really kind of carries the day here,
Hmm.
in my opinion, and kind of probably elevates this one a little bit more. So,
Yeah.
what do you say to
I
that?
agree. No, I think for the people who are voting for this as a package, and as mentioned, certainly D1 appeared in enough different permutations because it appeared by itself. It appeared in this kind of 2 adventure package. It appeared, in the whole series, there's lots of variety there. Um, I don't even know if I own this particular permutation. I mean, as far as I
Really?
know, this particular incarnation was basically just the 2 adventures very much as they were originally published. Now, I think they did throw in some of the pre-gen characters
Hmm.
for, I want to say, Shrine of the Koatoa in this kind of dual package here, but aside from that, it's pretty much the same thing.
Yes.
Um, yeah, we've discussed this previously. I think, D1 is fairly, but it's not bad. I love the map, of
Hmm.
D1 and some elements of it, little hidden touches, crazy little things like the Lich just chilling out on the shelf that the
Hmm.
players can find, or the magical fountain. But yeah, it's pretty pedestrian. It's sort of a monster hotel, it's sort of all the servitor creatures you're kind of exposed to in D1. But when you get into D2, that's, as we've talked
Yeah.
many times, that's when the fun happens, because then all of a sudden you're introduced to this very kind of Lovecraftian environment.
Mhm.
I mean, the one thing I love for this particular book as a package is just the contrast to these two adventures and environments, I think is really wonderful, because
Yeah.
it is almost deceptively off-putting, because the characters will go through this kind of major cave complex in D1 and then be exposed to
Yeah.
D2. And you get this nice, contrast of environments. Now, for both of them, I think the one thing it could have used, especially in this two adventure package, if you're going to look at it as a two adventure deal and separate it out of the overall G chain, some kind of overall MacGuffin or mission to kind of drive the action through this. I've always said that D2 I thought was a fantastic setting, but not really
Hmm.
an adventure.
Yeah.
And D1 kind of almost falls into that category too. And I think if there was a purpose for what the characters were doing going through here, if they, some of the underground creatures had stole something or kidnapped some people or something and pulled them underground, if they were tracking a renegade Drow through these areas, and I'm going to say Drow, damn it,
Mhm.
if they were tracking like a renegade, through these encounter areas, anything just to get the characters like a background sort of reason for why they're going through these places, I think would make it sing.
I agree.
Um, but both, especially D2, if you have an able GM, it's so much fun. I mean, I look at Shrine of the Coed every time we talk about it now, I want to pull it out and play it, and
Yeah.
just I want
Yeah.
to pull it out, breathe some life into it. It definitely needs some work from the DM, but I think, oh my goodness, the fun I could have with that,
Yeah.
right now.
I agree with you completely. There did need to be a little bit more of a sense of a mission. I know the mission was get to the vault of the
Yeah.
drow. But not. So the only change, I agree with you. The only change I would make is you're tracing down a renegade drow, not a renegade drow. So that's the only change I would make to it. But outside of that, you definitely had. I agree. They both of these felt more like a cool setting.
Yeah.
And again, if your characters were laser focused, they would go right past a lot of these adventures. They would kind of scoot through and just get, our
Yeah.
goal here is to get through this and not like, enjoy the islands and enjoy
Hmm.
the vacation kind of thing. So that's very interesting. I pulled up the list. So D2 on its own made the list back at number 46. So that's
Right.
surprising that D2 itself was at 46. D1 D2 makes it up to 36. So
Yeah.
it's interesting. It could also be that just more people were exposed to this format than the other, because the other format was the monochrome adventures, D1,
Yeah.
D2 separated out. And those were published in the 70s. And I know a lot of people didn't actually have those.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, and I'm pretty sure the first copy of these I got was the blue combo pack of both
Oh,
of them.
okay.
And then I think I went back and eventually picked up the mono
Hmm.
color ones down the road. So I'm hoping that they would be different, and being disappointed that nope,
Yeah.
they're exactly the
But
same.
no, that's a good point. It could
Yeah.
totally be exposure, because, I'm totally dating myself, but I was a mono module. D1 was actually the very first adventure module I ever bought, was
Okay.
was
Yeah.
was D1. So that mono cover with the troglodytes on it is just so memorable to me, because it was
Yeah.
kind of my introduction to this whole, swirling adventure thing that's consumed my life since. But yeah, I think for folks who got these collectively, and it's the sum of the whole. I think it's just, maybe some people are ranking this higher because they're mixing elements of the two, like you said, when they're recalling things, and it's just, it's Shrine of the Koatoa plus. So
Yes.
more
I think that's
underdark.
a great, I think it's a great way to kind of look at it. And I like I said, I enjoyed both of these, played them numerous times, played them once, game mastered them a couple of times, I
Hmm.
believe. Yeah. And I've also just pulled out the shrine and used the shrine too, and used it for
Hmm.
lots of inspiration and everything. And so I've done that. And you know, we didn't talk about it, but I know we talked about it in our shrine show last year. I guess probably over a year ago now. Where with the introduction of the Koatoa, and just
Yeah.
how fascinating they were, and just how much detail Gygax gave them, like a full like page or a page and a half write up, and like I said, we talked about the unique weapons, tactics, the
Yeah.
fact that you had cleric assassins. Like, who has cleric assassins? That's a
Yeah.
crazy combo. And you had the princes, you know, you had
Hmm.
the princes, the kings, and everything, and just you know, again, not a vanilla, here's a bunch of orcs to go kill. It's like there was a structure, there was a society, it
Yeah.
was twisted, but it
Yeah.
was there, and you just got a lot of detail about them. And like you said,
Yeah.
a shame that you could kind of just blow past them and not even get into all that if you
Yeah.
didn't have that laser focus.
That I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's such a good point. Both these modules introduced some very cool monsters and really
Yeah.
gave them word length to
Yes.
make them different. I mean, I remember one of my criticisms with some of the monsters, like in the Fiend Folio, is you just kind of were thrown some underdark humanoids and you weren't really given a lot of background, and it just felt
Yeah.
very blah, where D1 gave us, I thought, definitely people forget these guys, but,
The
and I'm going
germline.
to, yeah, I'm going to totally, I say, how do you pronounce it?
I say the germline,
That,
but
all right,
it's
yeah,
also
Germline. That's all right. That's what I
the
say.
jinxkins,
Yeah, the
they
Jinx,
call them.
the Bane midges or whatever.
Yeah,
I
yes,
think
yes.
those guys are so cool as a sort of
Yeah.
evil nuisance monster. They remind me of that horror movie that Don't Be Afraid of the Dark or whatever it was called. Those little guys scurrying around. I swear to this day, I think Gygax got them from that. And then yeah, in D2, you get the deep gnomes, you get the
Yes. Oh, I
Koatoa.
forgot
I
about the deep
mean,
gnomes.
yeah,
Yeah,
and both the deep gnomes and the Koatoa are so well realized to
they
me.
are.
Like,
Yeah,
this is how you write a monster race, folks. Like, if you
exactly.
want a sterling example of how to write up a monster race that's memorable and will endure and be looked at as a real breathing living race, to me, this is how you do it. Find this
Yeah,
book and look up the Koatoa, because
totally.
their society, their religion based, like you said, the whole cleric assassin, the monitor thing, everything is kind of laid out, and really
Yeah.
they're just made so different. It's not just orcs with fish heads. They
Yeah.
really, Gygax kind of, put the effort in to make these guys sing, and that really is a very memorable part, I think, of why this module
I
works. The
agreed,
second part of
because
this sings.
yeah, they're classic. They're classic now. I mean, the Germline not so much classic
Right.
D&D, but certainly the Deep Gnomes, and certainly the Drow,
Yeah.
certainly the Kotoa. Yeah, I mean, they I think they stand up above some of the others. I see that that history professor has joined us. Just for the end of the show, history professor, we started an hour earlier. I mean, I think you're in a different time zone, but you know, so you always pop in right when we're getting ready to sign off. So but anyway, we're glad that you're here,
And I
that you
appreciate the
made it.
Slee Stack call out too. I just want to say that
Yes. I
the
love
poor
the sleeve
Slee
stacks.
Stacks could never hit anything with their javelins, but I still like them.
I
So
still like them too. They were cool. They were without a doubt. They were definitely cool. So there you have it, folks. Another five down. We are into the 30s now. Before you know
mm,
it, you know, we're gonna be cracking into the 20s. And things are gonna start getting exciting. I hope you guys
yeah,
are liking the new show.
yeah.
As we said, we're gonna be building towards something here by the end of the year. We're gonna be getting to some pretty exciting titles and everything. Just to recap, our number 40 tonight, The Haunting. Our number 39, Dungeonland, EX1. Number 38, B10, Night's Dark Terror. Number 37, G3, Halls of the Fire Giant King. And number 36, D1 to 2, Descent into the Depths of the Earth. So Rick, what do you got to tell the folks like you always
Sure,
do?
folks. Well, as always, folks, as I always say, because I mean it, so glad you could join us and just, hear us chat away about these adventures we really, really love. We're glad you could join us. If you liked what you saw, please give us a follow, give us a like. If you're watching on YouTube later, subscribe. And as Chris said, we read all those comments. We'd like to hear what you have to say about the show, about the format, about all that stuff. We read it all. So keep that input coming. We appreciate it. Our next show is coming to you. We're always hitting the end of the month here now. So we're coming to you Sunday, May 26th at 8 p.m. again. And we're going to go just move on into the list, going into number 35 through 31. We're starting to drill down. So I hope you can join us.
Yeah. So Grape Ape Text, can we get these names covers all printed on a poster? I'm not sure
Ooh,
about that, but I
yeah.
think we could probably maybe put together some of the lists, like maybe 10 at a time or something like that, so folks can kind of see them a bit at a time. I'll work on that. We've been a little bit busy the last couple of weeks here at things. So but always great to have all you folks here.
Yeah.
And looking forward to diving into the early 30s on our next episode. And before you know it, we are going to be back again. So folks, everybody start enjoying that awesome weather as we start turning into summer. And the next time we see you, we will be into the throes of summer, and it'll be summer convention season right around the corner. So everybody have a good rest of your Sunday evening and have a good rest of your month, and we will see you in 4 weeks. Have a good night.
See you, folks.